Here we are, episode 10, a milestone. Another edition of Touchstone's Music. I'm continuing my series on music and albums from the 1960s. These are albums I purchased when they were first released in the 60s, and which have been musical touchstones for me ever since. The goal is to introduce these albums to people who haven't heard them before and to reintroduce them to those who maybe haven't listened to these great albums for a while. Now today we're going to do something special to celebrate our 10th episode. We set the controls on our time machine ever so slightly ahead and feature another self-titled debut album released in February 1970 but recorded in 1969, Black Sabbath. We could not leave Sabbath out. We had to do something on them.
What is this that stands before me?
Great stuff. So, let's talk about the band. The band consisted of Tony Iommi on guitar, Bill Ward on drums, Ozzy Osbourne on vocals, and Geezer Butler on bass. Now, a little known fact, before the band was ever formed, guitarist Iommi, who'd been playing for a while, had the tips of his middle and ring fingers cut off in a sheet metal accident. This was he was left-handed, and so he fretted the guitar with his right hand, and so he had to relearn how to fret the guitar, which resulted in his developing a very unique sound in his playing, so kind of a mixed blessing, I guess. Osbourne and Butler had left their previous band, Rare Breed, and connected with Iommi and Ward to form a new one. The bassist Butler was originally a guitarist, so when he switched to bass, he really didn't know what to play at first, so he would just copy Iommi's guitar riffs, and the result was an overall very heavy sound, which fit their music very well. Another lucky accident. The album was recorded 16th of October 1969. Yes, they recorded this basically in one day. Initial recording one day, some overdubs were added on the following day. In total, about 12 hours. It was released on 13th of February 1970, and yes, this was a Friday the 13th. I checked with Google, but as I said, they had originally recorded in 1969, so I'm kind of cheating here, but that's close enough. The studio was Regent Sound in London. The producer was Roger Bain, and the label was Vertigo. Length was about 38 and a half minutes, depending on whether you look at the UK or the US release. And on the UK album charts, it topped at number 8. In the US Billboard top LPs, number 23. Very respectable outing for an initial recording by a band that basically very few people had heard of. Sabbath had been touring for over a year and merely played their live set in the studio to record the tunes. Almost all the recordings were first takes, and they were finished primary recording, as I said, in one day. Post-production was minimal. They added the sounds of a thunderstorm and some bells to the original song Black Sabbath, which you heard a clip from at the start. And a couple of other songs had the guitars double-tracked. Otherwise, it's basically what you would have heard had you seen them on stage at that time. It's another self-titled album in our series. There's not too much to say about that. Now, the album cover, on the other hand, the location was Maple Durham Watermill, River Thames, Oxfordshire, in England. And you can see the picture on the left shows what it looks like, and then the picture on the right after the photographer had finished, adding filters, and there's a witch in the foreground there and so forth, making it suitably foreboding. Now, the photographer was Keith Stewart McMillan, and the model was Louisa Livingstone. Now, supposedly, she wore nothing underneath the robe, just like a real witch might. And the photographer experimented also with injecting some overt sexuality into the shot, but decided it would detract from the foreboding tone they were aiming for. So that didn't end up in the final photograph. My impression at the time, well, I purchased this around March of 1970, very shortly after its release. Since the term heavy metal wasn't popularized yet, I thought of their music as a sort of extreme hard rock. I especially love Tony Iommi's guitar work on this album, hard rock but retaining a lyrical edge. I find this whole album fresh and very, very unpretentious in a funny kind of way. Iommi's sound was very inspirational for other budding guitarists of the time, myself included, and it helped set a direction in our playing style. So, side one of the vinyl, Black Sabbath, the initial song. So now you have an album named Black Sabbath, you have a group named Black Sabbath, and you also have a song named Black Sabbath. So collect all three. Was the initial song. You heard a bit of a clip from that at the start. The Wizard was song 2. And the third listing was actually 4 songs kind of married together. Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, Basically, and NIB. Now, we'll play a bit of a cut from that last one. I think this would be technically Wasp, but don't quote me. It may be Behind the Wall of Sleep. Great stuff. And very tight. The band was already super well. Of course, they've been playing for a year and a half, so they're basically just doing their live set. Side 2 started with a song that they hadn't written. It was called Evil Woman. Now this is not a bad little blues rock rocker, but they were unhappy. Not that they included it on the album, but that it was picked and released by the record company as the single. Didn't do very well, and so they weren't too happy about that. The song itself isn't bad, and I'll play a clip from it in a second. And then we have another one of these composite songs as the final cut. This is on the U.S. Release, by the way. A Bit of Finger / Sleeping Village / Warning. And this was written by the band, plus several other people, including Ainsley Dunsbar. So this is a real group composition. But let's hear a little bit of Evil Woman. This would be the single, which unfortunately didn't do very well, but the album did, as you saw, pretty well in the charts.
I see a look of evil in your eyes.
Well, Sabbath's debut album was considered to be the first heavy metal album, and the title song, Black Sabbath, to be the first doom metal song. Black Sabbath are considered by many to be in the forefront of groups who helped to bridge the gap, so to speak, between hard rock and heavy metal in the late 60s, along with such contemporaries as Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and all three of those were huge arena draws in the 70s. Sabbath always seemed to me to be a people's band. They never forgot their working-class roots, and as a result, they have some of the most loyal fans of any group I know. This album has been one of my touchstones since I purchased it in the 60s, and I hope it will be for other people as well. Well, that's all for this edition. As always, until next time, be well, and thanks for joining me.
Thank